Tesla has to recall every single Cybertruck that they've made. They're finally fixing Intel's instability on their chips, and Intel's fixing their GPU performance. It's going up more percentage points. Let's get into the hot news, everybody. I'm your Brett host. We're going to be going over the hottest tech news I can find on the internet while you enjoy your breakfast. This Monday, April 22nd, 2024. We're going to start off today talking about the Tesla news that went around, which is that they had to recall every single Cybertruck because the accelerator pedal, when you pressed it down, could slip off and get stuck underneath the footwell. Yes, this massive $100,000 vehicle did not have its accelerator pedal fixed appropriately. So they're doing that now. However, within this, they had to confirm how many deliveries of the Cybertruck they had, and that's roughly around 4,000. This is big news because Tesla has not even divulged that to shareholders yet, but it's legally required to release when they're talking about how many vehicles they're going to recall. They had to put a stop sale on selling the Cybertruck, and then they actually have to physically modify these Cybertrucks in order to make them safe for the road. So there's plenty of videos going around showing how this cover on the accelerator pedal detaches, and it is a simple fix, which makes you wonder why wasn't it done at first. Tesla says that it's because there was some unadvised lubricant added during the installation process of soap, and that's causing it to slip off, but regardless, it's not physically tethered in any way, so they're going around and riveting the accelerator pedal down. They didn't render the outside of the vehicle, they didn't complete the inside of the vehicle. Man, you're spending $100 grand, what do you expect? But that's on top of a bunch of other stuff that is weirdly going on over at Tesla. We talked about last week how they're implementing over 10% layoffs of their employees due to financial markers that they are not hitting. Elon Musk calling it a reset, but also they're now resetting a few other things that they said that they weren't going to do, like drop the price of full self-driving. Last week, they dropped the price of the subscription, and now they've dropped the price of the entire purchase package down to $8,000. But with that, they're also removing enhanced autopilot, which may not seem like a big deal, but this is a big marker for something that Elon Musk has said adds $100,000 to the car's value, so the price should always go up. The fact that they're chopping a good 33% off the price and saying, hey, sorry everybody who bought it for 12 grand, it's just significantly cheaper, even though we always told you that the value would go up. Additionally, they're dropping the referral program where you could get certain incentives for having your friends buy a Tesla. They're also dropping the price on 3 of their different models, the Model Y, S, and X, even though they just raised the price on the Y because they wanted everybody to buy it before the end of Q1. Turns out they didn't have enough sales in order to do that, and now they're having to restructure the company quite a bit in terms of how they're choosing to approach things. It's kind of intriguing to see how they're floundering. The Cybertruck not selling a ton, also having all of these other issues being consistently delayed, and then the fact that they're changing their tune on how much they're charging for full self-driving makes it seem like the company is rethinking some of the strategies that got them to where they are. But Nvidia's not going to do that. You might remember that GTX is dead, all right? RTX is the only thing that you can buy now, but somebody got their hands on a GTX 2070, which might sound weird because that card never actually existed. Somebody found this out in the wild, they purchased a GTX 2070, and it performs actually pretty dang close to an RTX 2070. You can see there on the side it says GTX, and it has roughly the same amount of cores, 2176 compared to 2304, and if you overclock it with the 2070's BIOS, it'll actually perform just like a 2070 would be expected to. This is intriguing simply because it confirms the details that we had heard way back when, that it wasn't sure what this generation was going to be called. There was some indication that it was going to still be GTX, and at the last minute they decided it was RTX. You can see this is in the 20 series Founders Edition, so the fact that it came with the G and not an R, and it has different specs, different cores, means that Nvidia definitely changed their shipping tune right at the last second. But I'm curious, have you ever gotten your hands on a GPU that allegedly didn't exist, like back in the day when there was the RTX 3080 10 gigs before they actually really started popping up? That was like when they initially launched, people were buying them in various smaller retailers across the world. I'm curious if you've ever gotten one of a weird GPU, which I want to talk a little bit more about that because Galax is launching a weird 4060 Ti. The Max version is a single slot. Look at that. It's a single slot 4060 Ti. I want it so bad. This reminds me so much of the GTX 1070 Katana that they released way back when. I always wanted this one. I couldn't afford it at the time because I was a much smaller YouTuber, and despite the fact that it was available in South Africa, I never got around to picking one up, and I just looked on eBay. I can't find any for sale here in the US. I Kind of want one. I would like to. It was a neat little GPU. It still had SLI. You could put two together in the same size as a single card. This is also with Galaxy's weird, when they started doing the weird dudes on the box thing. I don't know. I like single slot GPUs. I want to see more of those happening. And I like Reece. I want to see more of him happening here for deals.
Yo, welcome back to UFD Deals, bringing the hottest tech deals out on the internet. Happy Monday, everyone. Hope you guys had a good weekend. And hey, we've got some deals for you today. Starting off with this ASUS ROG Strix XF120 case fans for only $12.99, making them $17 off for some really sleek case fans. But then next up, we have the Elgato Wave Mic Arm LP, or low profile, which is my favorite. I have one right here and I can highly recommend it at $79.99, making it $20 off. And then lastly, we have this Acer 27-inch 1440p 170Hz gaming monitor for only $151.99 with the included promo code, making it $98 off. And hey, with that, the deals are done. You can find these and more linked in the video description down below. But until next time, I'm gonna hand you off back to Brett for the rest of your hot news. Cheers.
Well, Reece, it turns out the US government thinks they got a bad deal when it came to passing the law to ban TikTok. So they're trying again, but with a different tactic. And the House of Representatives here in the US passing over the weekend a bill that will ban TikTok or force ByteDance to divest it from their infrastructure. This is now again passed the House, but it is part of a larger foreign aid, foreign investment spending bill that includes a lot of military spending, and it's just kind of wrapped up all in there. So it'll change all of that and potentially make it so that the Senate is more likely to pass it, at which point it is more likely to become law. There are a couple key changes between the previous bill that was passed by the House that never went anywhere in the Senate. It didn't get voted on and denied. It just hasn't been voted on. But the big change here is that ByteDance will have 12 months to get rid of TikTok as opposed to the original 6 months, so giving them a little bit more time. This one does seem a little bit more likely to pass here in the Senate, specifically because it's tied to all of these other interests that look like they would be passed in the Senate. But we'll just have to keep an eye on how all of this plays out. There's a couple key players that have discussed buying TikTok, whether it's billionaires here and there, the former CEO of Activision Blizzard, Bobby Kotick, which everybody rejoiced when they heard that he wanted to purchase that. That was sarcasm. This is going to create a weird situation over the next little bit. If TikTok goes down, YouTube Shorts is just going to be pumping and jumping, which is not what's happening when it comes to DVDs and Blu-rays, because we talked a few months back about how Best Buy was getting rid of all of their physical media besides video games. They're being yeeted out of there. Well, another major retailer here in the United States is doing the exact same thing. Target announcing that they are getting rid of physical media. DVDs, Blu-rays, they're all getting yeeted. Not going to be available in the store anymore, which is an intriguing thing. I mean, I do understand that they take a large physical presence in the store and probably aren't selling a whole lot, especially when it comes to, having it available on different streaming platforms, or the potential able for you to be able to rent it digitally, all of that. It might not make it very accessible, but I've read a couple interesting just thought pieces around this idea, including the fact that as this streaming divestiture that's going on, where everything's just getting put in its own little bubble and the prices are getting raised and content is getting harder and harder to access on a singular system, people have speculated that physical media is kind of like the last bastion of you can own your content. And if that goes away, well, then you're now going to be put in a space where, hey, potentially more people are going to end up pirating all of this content, and then we're going to have a renaissance of physical media coming back in something like the 2030s in order for all of these Hollywood companies to start making money again, because they force people to have to get it in means that they otherwise couldn't. I'm curious to see how all of this plays out. Will this actually bring about change? Is it just they never sell these to begin with, so it's really not going to change anything? This has no larger impact on society as a whole, or is this the harbinger of something to come? I'm curious to see how it plays out, which is what I said about what's going on with Intel's high-end 13th and 14th gen systems, 13900K, 14900K. Curious how it plays out. Seems like a big problem. And over the last little bit, it's been confirmed that, yeah, this is quite a big problem. Intel is actively looking into it. They don't have a whole lot of solutions, but you got companies like Falcon Northwest, which we've done a video with them previously. You can check it out right up there on their Talon pre-built, but they came out and they discussed a few ways that you could get your CPU stable, specifically with the motherboard company that they tend to use, which is ASUS, in their pre-builts that they sell. And it's good on them for releasing this information, but does show that, hey, something weird is going on where you have to change so many settings. So you have to turn off multi-core enhancement, which a lot of people complained ASUS was just pushing CPUs too high with as well. You had to change the SVID behavior, which is this setting that if your overclock is too high, it's going to continuously push push the voltage to kind of stabilize it, thereby enabling riskier overclocks and changing like the power management stuff. Like there's a lot of manual tweaking that has to go into this, even if your motherboard is set to default settings. So after Falcon Northwest released this very helpful guide, ASUS releases an Intel baseline profile option in the BIOS to help fix all of these issues, where it changes a lot of the things that Falcon Northwest published are potentially causing the instability that you're finding in the CPU, because these motherboards are pushing the CPU beyond what they are capable of, specifically on a long-term basis. Yes, it's nice to get as much performance out of the box as you can, but they're actually not falling within what Intel is saying is the recommended specifications for these CPUs to perform at comfortably. And you can see this even in the Cinebench scores testing of 14900KS now versus the regular BIOS that was happening previously, and it's a 13% decline in performance. It's pretty significant. So it's good on ASUS to fix this. Even the CEO of Epic Games saying, "Oh, thank you, ASUS, it's great. The PC gaming was going to devolve into unfixable unreliability." But I just want to echo what Buildzoid said on Twitter. So why aren't the Intel factory default settings the default settings? Why is this a problem in the beginning? Why are we having to deal with this? I mean, number one, it's probably going to be partially on the motherboard manufacturers that they want to push this as much as possible in order to differentiate themselves. The reason you're going to buy a Strix board versus a Gigabyte board is because you feel like you get faster performance out of Strix boards, because they're doing things like having the multi-core enhancement enabled by default, whereas that's causing instability in your CPU. But then Intel's incentivized on the other side to not do a freaking thing about it, because they, hey, get better benchmarks when they're put in these motherboards. You buy a high-end motherboard, you get faster performance. Why? We don't really know. But in reality, it's because they're pushing the CPU past what Intel says the CPUs are rated for. It makes Intel look good that this is happening until we get to the episode where, hey, this is actually quite a big problem all around. When I'm spending $600 on a gosh dang CPU and another $600 on a motherboard, and I can't get stable performance in freaking Baldur's Gate 3 at stock settings, because you're farting around trying to do better marketing numbers, yeah, it creates a big problem where I think Buildzoid's quite right here. Why aren't the settings the default ones? Why is that not baked in? Why do I have to go in and change it to baseline when that should be the baseline? Enabling XMP, if I'm enabling, an overclocking mode, sure, but the fact that whatever is stable for the chip is not even included as a freaking profile on the BIOS, ASUS is certainly to blame here. No echoing of what Tim Sweeney's saying. ASUS, yeah, you should have done this from the very beginning. We're in this problem because of y'all, because of the motherboard manufacturers, also probably because Intel's turning a blind eye and now actually needs to step up to the plate and make sure that they're enforcing some of these standards where, yeah, the default profile is the default profile. You might lose a little bit to AMD, you might have to lose a little bit of sales, but at least you're not killing your customers' chips and we feel like you can't be relied upon. So this is likely going to get resolved after reading what Falcon Northwest put out about this, as well as hearing from different tech media that have been in contact with Intel regarding all of this. It seems like this is a very big problem. This is something Intel is aware of. They are actively working on it, and we're probably going to see some industry-wide ramifications come down the pipeline, specifically on the motherboard side. It's going to be interesting to see what the fallout is and how much this will affect people's desire to trust Intel moving forward. But what is a different thing to trust Intel on is graphics cards, because it's hopefully a different department that's working on it right now. But there's new Intel ARC drivers coming out, continuing to show in good faith that Intel is making improvements on one side, even while they're having some struggles on another side. So they released a brand new driver which is expected to increase DX11 performance, which was one of the main areas where these cards struggled when they first launched. So Intel coming out and saying that you could expect between 5 and 48% better performance in various different DX11 games thanks to this new driver, including in video games like Fortnite or Days Gone, as well as Dyson Sphere program. And it's not just limited to the desktop ARC graphics, but this also applies to their Intel Core Ultra Meteor Lake integrated graphics, which have some ARC Alchemists. It's good news to see, especially as we're waiting for Battle Mage to come out. I just kind of continue on a champion Intel's graphics sides, even if we're having a little feisty maneuver with everything that they're doing on the CPU side at the current moment. But what happened in the past moment is y'all commenting on a previous episode of Hot News. So let's do that. Over Over on Friday's episode, we got Kokodin saying, finally, CPU-powered kitchen stoves incoming. Jacob Block saying, you know what else consumes 500 watts? The freaking space heater in my garage. Yeah, like a tiny one, yeah, like a small space heater will do 500 watts, but I get your point. It's a lot of heat. Orc Warbly saying, suckling a lot of juice. And we got Luan saying, really like your shirt missing ironing. I like this trend because I follow it. It's not a trend for me. I don't iron things. It's not a thing that I have desired to do. I haven't worn enough shirts where ironing was like a real thing that I needed to do. Additionally, I don't know, there was a part of living in South Africa and seeing like a lot of people ironed a lot of stuff all of the time. Like we knew a lot of people that like ironed their towels after the wash, which it is slightly different because a lot of people aren't using tumble dryers over there. I mean, when we did our laundry, it was clothesline dried because tumble dryers were just not a widespread phenomenon in most households. So it does wrinkle in different ways, but I don't know. I just never subscribed to ironing. I'm gonna fluff up my clothes as I'm wearing them, so I'm not too bothered by them being fluffed up when I put them on. But now let's go ahead and read some comments from the weekend's video. We did have the Intel sponsored Gigabyte laptop video that we did, so let's see what you had to say about that. Blatant Guide saying, bro, WTF, Intel sponsored you, GG, bro. This is not the first sponsorship that we've done with Intel. I think we've been working with them for, I don't know, close to 2 years at this point, and I don't necessarily feel like I can't have rants like I did early in Hot News, despite the fact that we are, working with them in a different capacity. But Joshua Scholar brings up a point saying it bugs me that he kept saying Intel in front of everything. It's not Thunderbolt, it's Intel Thunderbolt. It's not Wi-Fi 7, it's Intel Wi-Fi 7. That gives people the mistaken impression you can't get Thunderbolt from AMD or Wi-Fi 7 from Qualcomm or Broadcom. I'm sure Intel insisted that he do this, but it undercuts my willingness to trust him. Not that matters. I already have enough computers and can't afford to buy new laptops anyway. I hear you. Number one, I mean, at the top of the video, in the description, everywhere where it's required disclosure, we communicate this is a sponsored video. This is not an objective look at the laptop. This video, essentially, when it is sponsored, the whole video is sponsored by the company, then it is effectively a piece of marketing for them. That is just generally how that works. That video is a marketing piece for Intel, Gigabyte, Aorus, and partially Newegg, because that's where they wanted us to tell you to go buy the laptop. But on the other side of it, like Intel Thunderbolt, you can't get Thunderbolt from AMD. It's not an AMD technology. Thunderbolt is an Intel invented exclusive technology. You can get Thunderbolt cards, which are still Intel Thunderbolt, to put on AMD systems, and there have been some AMD systems that have Thunderbolt, but that's because they companies didn't license it properly from Intel in order to do it. But Thunderbolt is exclusively an Intel technology. Like that one, I'm sorry, Intel Thunderbolt is what it is. USB 4, that's a different communication. Does it include some Thunderbolt protocols? Sure, that's a different conversation. But this is a Thunderbolt port. This is an Intel Thunderbolt 4 port. AMD doesn't make Thunderbolt. And then when it came to the Wi-Fi 7, it's an Intel Wi-Fi 7 chip. Like I can get the argument that Qualcomm, Broadcom, other companies might make Wi-Fi 7 chips, but Intel makes Wi-Fi chips. Like the point of me disclosing that it's an Intel Wi-Fi chip is the fact that it is an actual Intel Wi-Fi chip that's in the laptop. Like I get that it feels like I'm just adding it as a tagline, but that is the actual technology. Like they didn't tell me to tell you that it's an Intel RTX 4070 that's in the laptop because Nvidia makes that GPU, right? Like I didn't have to tell you it was an Intel screen because Intel doesn't make the screen, but they did make the Wi-Fi chip. They are the exclusive developer of Thunderbolt, so it makes sense that they would want me to highlight those things. That's exactly why. But like, I understand like it can undercut, you think that I am unable to criticize Intel. I mean, see my rant earlier in this video, see Friday's episode of Hot News, the video that came out directly before this laptop, where I criticized their naming schemes. I think, hey, it's bad. I mean, they've even shown that they're starting to change it. They changed it from Xeon Scalable down to Xeon 6 because they realized, hey, bad naming scheme. I think Core Ultra, kind of ridiculous. I think the fact that they call it Core i9 processor 14900K, also ridiculous. But At the same time, this video is a marketing piece, so if that's how they want me to pronounce it in that video, I'm going to do that because that is the purpose of the video, is to be a marketing video for Intel. Hot News is not meant to be a marketing mouthpiece for Intel or any other company besides the company that tends to sponsor Hot News, which comes in all different shapes and forms. So you take that for what it is. I try to make sure to let you know, hey, if a video is sponsored, we will always disclose that. We will always make sure you know, hey, this video where we're talking about this product, I have been paid to talk about it. So I'm gonna focus on the highlights and the overviews of what these companies want me to bring towards the table. If it doesn't have that sponsorship disclosure, you're going to see comparisons. You're going to see me taking some objective stances and showing you some things that compared to other companies. But when it comes to, when a video is sponsored, me being able to objectively say, hey, Intel laptop better than AMD laptop, I can't do that because I'm being paid by Intel. So I'm not even going to come close to saying that. I think like the ethos of this comment is correct. I think some of the particular points are wrong, right? Like it is Intel Thunderbolt. I'm not going to argue about that, but I get the ethos of like, hey, you're sponsored by this company. How can I trust what you say? Well, in that video, you have to know that it's a marketing piece, but at the same time, I think when it comes to content creators on the internet, you have to decide, do I believe that this person did due diligence beforehand to vet the product that they're going to be talking about? Or it doesn't particularly matter and you're just like, hey, they got paid, whatever. It's up to you how you want to see it. I understand what you're getting at. I try to make sure that we're blatantly clear when it comes to what our sponsorship content is, so that there's never a question of, hey, were they paid for this? If I'm being paid, I'm gonna let you know I've been paid for it. There should not be any ambiguity there. And what we did not get paid for was Sunday's video about the GTX 750 Ti that Kyler did, because I wouldn't even know how to get in contact with this company. And on their Amazon product listing, they say it's a NVIDIA GPU, not even NVIDIA. But Adam's Got Game says, great production. Mr. Baskin says, you're so charming and consistent in solo videos. Maybe Brett is the vibe vacuum. And then Ronnie saying, you perform better alone. Good video. I do agree that it was a great video by Kyler. I do kind of want to address like the maybe I'm the vibe vacuum, or like Kyler is doing great in these solo videos. I think part of that is just because when it's Hot News, it's kind of like he has to play second fiddle to me, or we'd have to give him more space to do kind of like Hot News presenting, which he did back when I had Shingles, when it was him and Reece co-hosting, and he did phenomenal when it came to that, especially with the limited training he had for that. But the way our days are structured, giving Kyler time to prepare for Hot News isn't really a thing that can happen. So he's coming in flying blind and he's just kind of trying to riff, whereas like these videos, he takes time, he's diligent and deliberate on what he's trying to communicate. And I mean, Kyler is just actually good at what he's doing. So like, despite the fact that like, hey, maybe some of the jokes here are a little weird, that's just because he's a weird guy, I'm a weird guy, and it creates funky situations. But when he's able to, focus diligently on a single thing, it's gonna show. And if I gave him that opportunity here on Hot News, it would also show. And if we tried to do this as a double team show, and we actively, made it more than just, hey, he's kind of like my sidekick wingman, he would be great at that too. We just haven't developed that based on the other needs for the business and him just kind of like showing up for Hot News. So that was a lot of like behind the scenes discussion. I'm a little worn out from that. So I'll be back here with more of the hottest tech news tomorrow. I'll see you then, my friends.